Welcome to the Matt Largent Concert.
Because if you're going to screw it up with style. You've got to serve and serve first, and then you have to make that conscious decision to lead.
Oh, if you have any problems, dial information. Thank you for calling.
Welcome back to the Matt Largent Concert. In today's episode, I want to really dive into something, and this is going to be super hard to do in 30 minutes, and I'm going to do it, though, because I want to explore a topic that every leader has faced at some point, and maybe you're facing it right now, burnout. Burnout isn't something just middle managers or overworked employees experience. Even the world's most recognized leaders have faced this at some point. And probably at multiple points in their lives and in their careers, at home or at work or whatever. Burnout is a very real thing. And so I want to talk about some of the signs of burnout, what you can do to work through it. Most importantly, how to move back into that optimal anxiety zone where growth and leadership thrive. And so if you missed last week, we talked about optimal anxiety zone. And I love the concept of optimal anxiety. If you've listened to me throughout 5 seasons at this point, I brought up optimal anxiety at multiple points, shared multiple experiences with you guys. And so I'm not going to dive more into optimal anxiety. I feel like I will probably bring it up again in the future. But optimal anxiety zone is that great space that we really want to be in and that we want to put our people into. But I'm going to tell you, God's honest truth, as a leader, it is primally important for us to be in that optimal anxiety zone, because that's where we are going to grow and we are going to be the best leaders that we possibly can be. If we aren't in that optimal anxiety zone, we have zero chance of getting our people into that optimal anxiety zone. And so when we go up and beyond that optimal anxiety zone, that's when we're getting burnout. That's when we're getting burnout. And if you think about it, and I'm going to try and insert a graphic at some point, and put it probably right up here. So if it works, I'm pointing at it. If it doesn't, blame the technical director, which is me. So optimal anxiety simply means this. If you think about your lower quadrant, you've got stress level. And so the lower the stress, the more bored you are. And then on the up and down on your x-axis, you've got your performance. And so low performance, low stress, boredom. Medium performance, medium stress, optimal anxiety. High stress, your performance drops back down, and that's where you experience that burnout. It's that point where you feel overwhelmed, where you feel exhausted, you're disconnected from passion. But the important thing that I want you to think of, if you're going through that right now, or if you're like, I am burnt out, the number one thing that leaders feel is that they're alone. That everyone feels during burnout is that they are alone. They feel disconnected. And that's an important piece of this that I really want you to start with and think of from the get-go. It's you versus the world is what that feeling is, instead of understanding that you're not alone in this. And so I'm going to give you guys an example because, I like to talk about personal experiences. So, for many years, I was spent in the military. Hear about PTSD. It was kind of a new thing. It had gone through several different things before, battle fatigue, and then different descriptions and diagnoses and all this other stuff. And so PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's multiple different kinds of PTSD, short-term PTSD, then you've got transitional, you've got all these different levels of PTSD that can happen from a very traumatic experience. And so everyone at some point has probably experienced one of those levels of PTSD. It may be a very minor one. You experience a traumatic, you go into shock, you're kind of freaked out. That is a form of PTSD. And so it just sounded like horse hockey to me whenever I was first hearing about this. And I thought, well, everybody goes through reactions to traumatic events. And so the study of PTSD was really the study of the long-term effects on it. Um, and so it wasn't until later on that when I got diagnosed with PTSD and started realizing um, that it's not just a recognizable thing, but started seeing and going to different groups. It's kind of like alcoholics trying to go through recovery, people with addictions going through recovery. The first thing is to realize that you're not alone going through this. You're not going through anything that somebody else hasn't gone through. Well, when you're going through burnout, you're not experiencing something that somebody else hasn't gone through or isn't going through right now. And so it's important to understand you're not alone. You're not alone in this nasty feeling of exhaustion. And so let's define what do I mean by burnout? Burnout is more than just feeling tired. It is a state of emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual exhaustion caused by prolonged stress. It is disconnection from your passions. It's an inability to focus. It's feeling drained despite continuous efforts. If you think about it, I like to tell people I really experienced my first serious burnout as a business owner, as a consultant, and I would come home and I was working 10, 12, 14-hour days. There was one time that I spent 3 days straight at work, just napping here and there. And it would sound like, man, you were overworking yourself. No, i my I was working so hard, but I was still drained. I was still feeling like I was not making any impact. I was not feeling passion for it. I wasn't focused. I wasn't driven. I was just going through the motions, and the motions were taking so long. Um, I was feeling just done. World Health Organization actually recognizes burnout, and it says that burnout is characterized by three key symptoms. One, emotional exhaustion. And so I'm sitting here working all of these days, and I was passionate about opening my organization. I was passionate about being a consultant for restaurants primarily, but for any organization trying to make the best out of their leadership, making the best out of teams. And so what I did was, as a consultant, is I would go in and I would figure out challenges and issues, and I would streamline and clean up. And sometimes it was just going in and just taking out everybody. They're like, hey, these people are not in love with the organization's values. They're not in line with it. They're just here. And we need to find people who are in line with it and are driven by it. So it was a passion of mine. You guys got to remember, I turned 49 on Friday, this last Friday. So depending on when you're watching it, just a few days ago, um, or listening to it. So this was 30 years ago, a little under 30 years ago that I was doing this. And so I'm in my 20s, early 20s, going out, but I had a passion then, understanding that values and vision were critical for leadership. And so that's what I would do. But it got to a place where I was just feeling worn out, depleted. No matter what I did, taking time, learning, training, developing, making impacts, I just wasn't able to recharge. Um, Cynicism is the second characteristic, a symptom that the World Health Organization says that burnout is characterized by, meaning that you're feeling detached, frustration, irritability, easy, quick, and you're frustrated, easy, and that was me to a T. Very frustrated, very irritable. I was detached from my work. I wasn't into it anymore. I got frustrated and tired very easily. Um, Reduced performance is the third key symptom that the World Health Organization says that burnout is. Um, Obviously, you're just not productive. Things that once felt manageable felt like you just can't get them done, and you're not being successful in it. If you go back to last season, we talked about ascend leadership. We talked about how to keep your team in a optimal performance, and it starts with you. If you're feeling that strain, that drain, and I'll simplify it. It got to the point where I just felt like at the end of the day, if you go home at the end of the day on a regular basis. Now we're going to have bad days. We all do. Everybody does. But if you're going home on a daily basis, just feeling drained, depleted, frustrated, feeling like that you're just not going to be successful, that you're just a failure. If you do look at yourself in the mirror and you feel bad at the end of the day, or like you didn't get anything done, then you need to really assess, am I burnt out? And be honest with yourself, because it's not a dirty word. Um, if I had embraced the idea, or at least been open, not necessarily embraced it, but if I had been open with the idea of PTSD and had paid attention to it earlier, it would have made a lot more impact in my life, a huge amount of impact in my life. But I think sometimes we get so fixated on the idea that it's not real, or that it's a sign of weakness, that we don't want to take it seriously. And burnout, PTSD, mental fatigue, even mental issues, they are very real. And we need to just embrace the idea or the opportunity that they can be out there. And guys are terrible about this. Well, in a certain degree, I think guys and girls both are terrible at this in their own unique ways. I mean, you look at Ariana Huffington. Has spoken many times on the impact that burnout has had on her career, as well as people like Elon Musk have talked about burnout. Huffington's burnout led to the founding of Global, and she created a company focused on reducing burnout and improving well-being. But Musk is known for his relentless work ethic, and has actually openly discussed the toll that has taken on his mental health, talking about emotional exhaustion leading to and leading multiple companies at once. Y- We've got to be open to the opportunity that burnout is real, because burnout doesn't signal failure. It's a sign that you've been giving everything without taking time to refill your own cup. You're driving your car without putting gas in it. You're burning the candle at both ends. Pick your acronym, pick your analogy, whatever you want to call it. You're pushing without refilling what you need to do. And so, how do we know if we are burnt out? Well, let's talk about the signs and how to recognize the signs of being burnt out in yourself as a leader, because it can creep up. It is something that all of the sudden we're just tired. We're just done. We've tried so hard. Maybe, and it can be literally a crash, or it can be all of a sudden one day you wake up and you dread going. You dread doing something that you used to love. And you're not just dreading it one day, but you're dreading it over and over and over again. Now, let me just be honest with you. There are going to be days that you're going to dread it, and there are going to be days that you're going to love it. But if you're constantly dreading it, then you need to look out. Then you've probably crossed over that hump into emotional exhaustion, into that burnout. So, as a leader, it's critical that we recognize the early indicators before it becomes overwhelming. So, here's some things to really look out for. One, look out for emotional and physical exhaustion. If you're constantly tired, no matter how much sleep you get, and emotional recovery seems impossible to you, meaning that you're constantly frustrated, you're constantly irritable, you're disconnected from those around you, including those at home. That's a really clear sign. People say you can leave your work at work and your home at home. That's bullcrap. You can't. If you get a ticket on the way to work, I promise you're taking that into work. If you get into a fight with your significant other at work, before work, or in the morning, or even the night before, and it's still weighing on you the next day, guess what? You're taking that into work. If you have a crappy day at work and you go home, you're not going home and going whoosh, and just coming in a bright and cheerful mood. You're coming in complaining and mad, and you want your significant other to listen to you. And so you've got to, those are going to cross over. But if you go home and you're maybe you're espousing to your significant other all the challenges that you face, and you're just even getting more frustrated, and you're not getting recovery out of that. If you're getting up in the morning and you're just exhausted and you don't want to be there, there's a good chance that you're struggling with some burnout. Maybe you second detachment or loss of interest. You find yourself disengaged. You don't care about the organization's mission anymore. It used to mean something to you. You felt like, and here's an easy one. If you're that person that goes, we used to stand for something, we used to mean something, you are getting burnt out or you are detaching from your organization's mission. And so, I'll jump on a mini political bandwagon. This is what we're seeing over the last several decades in the US is there's such a detachment in the mission of the United States because you have these two crazy extremist edges on it, just taking it way too far. And so you just become losing interest. You become disengaged, disattached. If you are going to work and you're like, you are not engaged with your organization, meaning that you're not emotionally invested in the organization's mission, vision, values, then you are struggling through some burnout issues. Maybe you're seeing a decreased productivity. That's a third targeted sign. Tasks and things that you were doing that made sense and that were easy, now they just seem like it's overwhelming. You're struggling to concentrate. Even simple activities that you used to do and knock out of the park and feel like a rock star. There are days that I go to work and at the midway through the point, I will literally say to people, "Hey, I am on it today. I have knocked out more than I have done in the entire last week. I am feeling it. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead. I'm gonna have some me time. I'm gonna take some downtime, enjoy it. I'm gonna refill my tank because I'm on the target." Recognizing when you are on the opposite end, I think is probably just as important. If you're rocking and rolling, then you need to don't just keep hammering away at it. If you're hammering away because you're rocking it out, that's awesome. But take that time because you're rocking it out to make sure that you are engaging yourself and that you are refilling that tank. Uh, because if you're starting to see those things that you did on a daily basis that just seems like it's overwhelming, and you're struggling just to concentrate, that's a good sign of burnout. Fourth, look for those irritability and frustrations, small things triggering larger than expected emotional responses. If you're sitting there saying, why am I so mad about this? Why? If you feel like you need to apologize for your actions a lot of time because you're frustrated about silly things, there's a good sign that you're in some burnout. And like I said, imagine this not just at the workplace. This is home. This is spiritually. This is emotionally. This is mentally. This is with your friends, with your family, with your significant other. This is, and I'll tell you, there are times when I get irritable and frustrated about stupid things, and I'm like, why am I so irritated about this? And I have to be honest with myself. I'm irritated because I am not engaged. I am a little burnt on this, and I need to push myself back and get myself back up on that hill. Gallup did a poll that found 76% of employees experience burnout at least occasionally. And leaders aren't 76% at least occasionally. It doesn't say at least once, it says at least occasionally. Leadership is far from immune. I would venture to say that a majority of leadership suffer from burnout on a regular basis, because when you're talking about the pressure of decision making, managing teams, carrying responsibility, that adds up. You're the one that's responsible for engaging these people around you. That adds up. That increased pressure can really burn you out, and it creeps up. It is so sneaky. Burnout whispers before it shouts. So you've got to listen to the signs so that you can prevent it from taking control. So if you're listening for these signs and you recognize that you're being burnt out, well, the first thing that we've got to do is we've got to acknowledge it. It's not a sign of weakness. We have got to, as leaders and as people, drivers are very, very hard about this. People who are competitive, very, very, they think it's a sign of weakness. I literally have had people in the military that I have had to beat the idea out of that, oh, pain is just weakness leaving the body. Well, weakness isn't going to leave. We always have weakness. We are not perfect. We are going to have pain. We are going to have struggle physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. We have to acknowledge that and accept it, and just own the fact that we can be burnt out, that it's not weak to be burnt out, that it's natural. It's just a sign that you've been running on empty for too long. We've been running on empty for far too long. If you drive your car too long on empty, you are going to be on the side of the road, and you're going to have irritability and frustration at that point for sure. But the good news is that there are proven strategies for working through burnout and getting back to a place of strength and optimal anxiety, optimal leadership. So let me give you just 4 different places that you can use to really attack and overcome that burnout. One, take a step back and assess. Take a break, even if it's a short one. There's nothing wrong. Movement is movement, whether that movement is forward, back, side to side, it's still movement. Stopping is stagnation. You've got to take a step back sometimes, assess, take a break. Sometimes that mental space that you get from stepping away helps you regain clarity. That doesn't mean that I step away from being a leader. That means I step away from all of the day-to-day, the minutia, the things that are driving me crazy, and just look at the overall. Regain my clarity in the image and in the vision of what I'm trying to accomplish. Quit getting bogged down and mired with the day-to-day. Secondly, I want to delegate. As leaders, we often take on too much. Learning to delegate effectively can reduce the burden on your shoulders, allow others in your team to step up and to be a part of that team. That is a hugely hard one. I had leaders that I'd just keep giving them stuff. And I had a leader one time that, was just frustrated that I'll get out and was like, I feel like I never have enough time to get all the things that you want me to get done. And I said, well, you have 7, 8, 9 other managers that work for you and several assistant managers, senior person. Why aren't you giving them some of these things to do? The thing is that sometimes delegation has come through a crash because we become so difficult at delegating. We think we need to do it all. Learning to delegate effectively reduces that burden on your shoulders. 3, prioritize your well-being, physical activity, proper sleep, mindfulness, nutrition, focusing on your spiritual aspects. I think people don't give that enough. And I'm going to tell you 100%, I believe everyone should believe in our Lord Jesus Christ and should believe in God and take care of themselves in that way. But your spirituality is going to be yours to own. I am 100% a believer that everybody's got to make their own decisions. God gave us that opportunity to make our own decisions. And so you decide where your spirituality, but you can't ignore it. You have to restore balance between your physical, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual. You need to have that good balance. If you look up off balance on purpose, and I know it sounds kind of oxymoronic from what I'm saying, it makes a lot of sense because it talk about, if you're juggling, you only have 2 hands. So at any one point, you only have 2 of those in your hands, whether it's your spiritual, your physical, your mental, but at the rest of the time, they're in the air. And you've got to understand, you can only control a little bit at a time, but they're connected through different strings. Go check it out. I think it's a really great program. But prioritize your well-being. 4th, seek support. This has got to be these 2 of these 4 steps. Stepping back and assessing, we feel like we can do. Sometimes we think that I think we take it too far because we think we need to. Stepping back means, oh, I'm going to take a step down, or I'm just going to not be a leader anymore. That's not what that means. Take a mental break or physical break or spiritual break just for a little bit. Step back and look at the bigger picture. What are you trying to accomplish 6 months, 12 months, a year down the road? Because the problem is we get so focused in the day to day that we miss those. But delegation and seeking support are if you're listening to this and you have no delegating or seeking support, then none of this probably connected with you, because you have probably very rarely felt burnout on that level. We take on too much because we feel like we're supposed to. We don't want to tell anybody we can't do it. And then when we get overwhelmed, we don't want to tell somebody. We don't want to tell our coach, our therapist, or our peers. We want to hold it in because we think we're the only ones. But if you talk through burnout with others who understand, that can provide an emotional release and some ideas of practical solutions. The American Psychological Association found that leaders who prioritized mental and physical well-being saw a 30% reduction in burnout symptoms. Because burnout is your body and mind's way of saying you've given too much. Now it's time to give to yourself. You've got to take care of yourself. Because the goal isn't just to avoid burnout, it's to return to that optimal anxiety. We're not just avoiding it, we're not just ignoring it. We've got to get back to where we're feeling optimal, where we're getting the most out of it, where we're experiencing new things. And we've got that little pit in the stomach feeling, but we're still going. And we're succeeding, or we're enjoying it, where you're challenged, you're motivated, you're growing without overwhelming yourself. Optimal anxiety is the perfect middle ground between comfort and stress. That's where you thrive. Once you've gotten through that burnout, you need to set boundaries, know your limits, and protect them. Be clear with your team and yourself, and know when you need to take breaks and when to say no. And give yourself periodic check-ins. See where your stress level's at. Ask yourself, am I thriving or am I pushing too hard? And then third, focus on growth, not perfection. Optimal anxiety is about progress, not perfection. It's not about always succeeding. It's not about failing, but it's about progress. Allow yourself to be challenged without the pressure of needing to be perfect. Look at people like Sheryl Sandberg. Sheryl Sandberg have spoken about finding the balance after experiencing burnout and advocating for transparency, self-care, and the importance for asking for help. Burnout pushes you to the edge. Optimal anxiety pulls you back and helps you to thrive on challenge. So let's recap a few things, because burnout is something that everyone's going to face and will face on multiple times. It's not the end. It's a natural response to prolonged stress. The key is to recognize it early, take action to recover, then recalibrate into optimal anxiety, where growth and leadership truly flourish. First, burnout doesn't signal failure. It's a sign you've been giving everything without taking time to refill your cup. Recognizing burnout is the first step to recovery. It's not failure, it's your time to recharge. 2, burnout whispers before it shouts. You have to listen to the signs so that you can prevent it from taking control. Learn to recognize the early signs and symptoms before burnout becomes overwhelming to you. Third, burnout is your mind and body and your spirit. It's their way of saying you've given too much. Now it's time to give back. I need to get more. And fourth, burnout pushes you to the edge. Optimal anxiety pulls you back and helps you to thrive. The goal is not just to escape burnout. It's not just to be okay, but to return to a place of growth. That's where you avoid the burnout. You want to get back to that place of growth where you can thrive on healthy challenges. Next week, we're going to continue our season's exploration of leadership with a discussion how to get some sustainable leadership practices that protect against burnout long term. So make sure that you come back and join us next week as we're talking about this. And if today's episode resonated with you, please subscribe, leave a comment, share your thoughts on how you manage burnout on your leadership journey. Look for others. I promise you, you are not alone. I was talking about burnout and leadership burnout and optimal anxiety just a few weeks ago, and there were so many head nodding in this group of leaders, and these are long-term experienced leaders. It's very natural. So leave your comments in the comment section so that others can see and be a part of the discussion. Thanks for joining me on the Matt Largent Concert, where we're not just talking about leadership, we're living it. We'll see you next week.
And like that, he's gone.